blessing that moment was just now. It's very humbling. And truly, truly, I'm just blessed to have a part in this church. I really am, of what God is doing. All right, so we are diving into story mode of Pilgrim's Progress. The story ended last week with Christian barely making it through the valley of the shadow of death. And if you remember, as soon as he comes out of it, he sees someone up ahead. He's continuing his journey from the celestial city, from the city of destruction to the celestial city. He sees someone that he recognizes. Someone from his hometown, the town of destruction. So he takes off running after him to catch up to him, and he finally does. The guy's name is Faithful. He knows him from his hometown. He grew up with them. Hey, they start talking to each other, start having a good time. Faithful says that Christian got a head start leaving the city of destruction. Faithful stayed behind, but eventually Faithful did leave and headed out towards the celestial city. They kind of get caught up. There's a long dialogue here. And by the way, I just summarized the book Pilgrim's Progress. You're going to get a lot more content. You're going to get a lot more out of the book if you read it for yourselves. If you're visiting here today, just by coming once during this series, you can take a free copy of Pilgrim's Progress. They're on the back table back there. We asked one per family. If you could take one book per family. So, where was I? Christian and Faithful. So they're talking, and there's a long sequence of dialogue here where this is a peaceful segment of Pilgrim's Progress that I'm going to breeze through, okay? So I'm just hitting the highlights. I'm hitting some of the heavier points, the trial at Vanity Fair. I'm kind of skipping to the next awesome part, okay, or exciting part, if you will. But there's pages and pages of the book here. Faithful starts talking about his journey that was slightly different than Christian's journey. Christian asked Faithful about Pliable. How's old Pliable doing? If you guys remember Pliable from the Slough of Despond. And Faithful says that Pliable had a hard time when he went back. The Bible talks about it's better for you to not even know Jesus than for you to know him and then reject him. That's a lot worse. The Bible's pretty clear about that. Pliable actually even has trouble finding work back in the city of destruction. People just kind of look down on him. Not a great ending for Pliable. We find out that Faithful passed through the Slough of Despond, that he found the path. He did not fall into the Slough of Despond. Faithful did not run into Mr. Worldly Wiseman. Do you guys remember him? But Faithful did meet up with a mistress named Wanton. A mistress named Wanton. And that's directly related to some verses in Proverbs that I want to read for you right now. As I get myself settled. Proverbs 7 and verse 10. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of an harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. So this woman tries to seduce Faithful, and Faithful does not give in. Faithful rejects her advances. And so Faithful continues. So the journey is kind of the same, but different at different times. And you hear Faithful's story here in this conversation. Faithful and Christian are so happy to have a companion with each other. They're continuing on the journey themselves. And somebody else comes into the scene. This fellow's name is Talkative. Okay, Talkative enters the picture, and he likes to talk. Hence me skipping that portion. Talkative is all about talking about the faith, but not acting on it. That is his role, his character, so to speak. He talks the game, but he doesn't walk the walk. So there's a segment of the story there. Eventually, Christian and Faithful, they kind of end up hitting heads with Talkative, and Talkative parts ways with them. The story continues, and Christian and Faithful meet up with Evangelist. Evangelist is back. Evangelist is the one who he was a big influence on the whole reason why Christian and Faithful left. Evangelist was the one who explained to them that there's a coming destruction. You guys got to get out of here. Told them about the Lord of the Hill. Explained to them what that book was, filled with all kinds of things in it. And Evangelist meets up with them again. And Evangelist, he encourages them. He inspires them. Guys, don't give up. Continue on the journey. Even if it gets tough, it's worth it. The Lord of the Hill God is going to take care of you guys. Keep going. Keep going. Evangelist then prophesies something to them. Evangelist says that in your next leg of the journey, the next town, things may not go that well. And one of you is going to have to shed blood for the testimony of the King of Kings. AKA, one of you is going to die coming up in the next town. But evangelist says, look, guys, whichever one of you it is, you're going to get a free pass straight to the celestial city. You're gonna miss out on all kinds of obstacles that are going to be in the future, and you're going to get a crown of life. As the Bible does talk about, you're going to get a crown of life. Lastly, he again encourages them to continue on in their faith, no matter what happens, good and bad. Evangelist parts from their path. Christian and faithful approach a town called Vanity. They approach a town called Vanity. In this town, there is a fair that runs all year long called Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair. Now, most of us here, or all of us here, are familiar with the Lake County Fair. Who's been to the Lake County Fair before? It's nice. Thank you. Another question. Who's been to the Porter County Fair? I've heard that one's better. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard the Porter County Fair is really awesome. Liz and I should go check it out maybe this year. This fair is a little different than those fairs because it runs all year long, and it's based on vanity. What is vanity? Well, I Googled it this morning. Google says that vanity means excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. I think there's a lot of definitions as far as vanity. Pride definitely has its root. Greed comes to my mind, vanity, selfishness. You know, a lot of these lusts of the flesh, they're all connected, aren't they? They all kind of have the same root. They're just manifested a little differently. And even the fruits of the Spirit often kind of seem kind of like the same thing, just worded differently. Vanity, just obsessed with possessions, obsessed with our own social status, obsessed with what am I going to get out of this. The Vanity Fair. Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 2. I love the book of Ecclesiastes. Have you read the book of Ecclesiastes? Phenomenal content. Phenomenal content that can help you in your life as the wisest man to ever live. And maybe, arguably, the richest man to ever live, Solomon, writes the book of Ecclesiastes as he is frustrated that he can't find happiness. He's frustrated. How is this possible that I have all wisdom, I have everything money can buy, talk about vanity, I have everything. Everyone wants to be like me. The people sell t-shirts that have my picture on it, and everybody names their baby Solomon. Everybody fantasizes if they had a magic genie, who would you want to become? Solomon. Everybody's trying to be like me, and I'm not happy. Why is that? Read the book of Ecclesiastes if you never read it. Phenomenal wisdom. You'd be getting a massive head start on everybody else in your world if you've read that book of Ecclesiastes and applied it to your heart of what Solomon learned in his life about life on earth. This is how the book starts out in Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. It's all one big waste of time. It's all nonsense. It's all going to pass away. It's all so pointless. That's a sneak peek of what Ecclesiastes is about. As Solomon goes in deep, dissecting what is life actually about? What are we here for? We're talking about vanity here today. I would think this leg of the journey is probably the closest one that connects us to our American lifestyle. This is something that we struggle with, certainly. Back to the story. Vanity Fair. This fair was started 5,000 years ago as Beelzebub, Apollyon, and Legion were just observing the countryside, and they noticed that pilgrims, all the pilgrims that are heading to the celestial city, there's a bottleneck through this town where they all have to pass. This town called Vanity. So they took advantage of that and decided to start Vanity Fair 5,000 years ago. In this fair, all kinds of things are sold and bartered. All kinds of things. Even some good things. They're fine. Good things, a lot of bad things as well. Just everything. Kind of like Amazon, right? Just you can buy anything at Vanity Fair. There's some list here of things that were sold. All kinds of merchandise. You could buy titles. You could buy whole kingdoms, pleasures, delights of all sorts, prostitutes, Slavery. Slaves were sold at this fair. Silver, gold, pearls, precious stones. There were jugglers, cheats, games, theft, murder, adultery, and liars were all common occurrences here at Vanity Fair. The fair existed on 4 main streets of the city. Those streets were called Britain Boulevard, Spanish Road, French Street, and Italian Avenue. I think old John Bunyan 400 years ago might have been taking a shot at the current world powers and their obsession with vanity. I think America would make the list if it would have been written here today. Here we go. Christian and faithful enter the town Vanity. As they're entering the town, and now they're entering the Vanity Fair district, they start standing out. They start standing out, and they start causing a commotion. People kind of start gathering around, just looking at them, staring at them. They start causing a stir. When I think about a crowd causing a stir, and what this might have been like, I think about years ago, I went on a history trip to Boston, Massachusetts. It was a college history trip. We happened to be there on Memorial Day, which was neat as far as the national heritage and history that is in downtown Boston, and we're just enjoying it. Were you there with me? Were you there on that trip? No? Okay, sorry, forget it. So we're standing there in downtown Boston, and all of a sudden the buddy next to me says, "Hey, that's Adam Sandler. That's Adam Sandler right there, right there." And he's an actor, comedian. It's been part of my life ever since I was a child, some of the things that he's done, songs he's written. And oh my word, that's Adam Sandler right there, downtown Boston. There were people everywhere. And he was just a few feet away from me. He was with his wife, and he was holding his little daughter, and he was talking to her. But he was talking to her in like this really loud, classic Adam Sandler voice. I'm like, no way, that's actually him. I know that voice. He has a very unique voice. And there he is. He's right there. And the crowd was just starting to figure out that was him. He was dressed very much trying to blend in, and he was actually a bit sloppy as far as how he was dressed, and he was just trying to blend into the crowd, trying to enjoy his own Memorial Day with his family. He was trying to just enjoy Boston like we were enjoying Boston. But people started noticing. I remember one guy kind of walked up to him and said, "Adam, can I get my picture taken with you?" And Adam just kind of like under his breath was like, "No, man, be cool, man. No, man. Just be cool, be cool." And it seemed like there became this like 5-foot barrier of nobody around their family. But then it was like packed with people beyond that 5-foot barrier. Not really sure how that happened. There's a crowd started gathering. It started getting awkward. I felt bad that the Sandler family couldn't even enjoy downtown Boston without becoming some kind of a freak show or something. They had to eventually slip away and get out of there. I mean, I loved it. Like everybody else loved it, except the Sandlers. So Christian and faithful walk into town Vanity, and they're standing out like a sore thumb. And it's just getting awkward for Christian and faithful. Why were they standing out? The story gives 3 reasons why they were standing out. Number 1, they looked differently as far as their attire. Remember, the Shining One at the Hill of Deliverance gave Christian a new robe to wear, and nobody at that town dressed like that. Their speech was different as they were talking to the people. People didn't recognize the jargon, the lingo. 1 Corinthians 2, verses 7 and 8. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory, which none of the princes of this world knew. There should be a communication disconnect between us and those who are not followers of Jesus. If there is a disconnect, that's actually a decent sign that's right, that's the way it is. That's natural. For had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. That's clear logic. If they would have known Jesus, if they'd have known what he was about, then they wouldn't have killed him. It's quite natural that there'd be a communication breakdown. And thirdly, the third reason why they were standing out like a sore thumb in town Vanity was they were ignoring Vanity Fair. They were ignoring all the different shops and setups and jugglers and just all of the hoopla circled around it. Woo! Isn't this exciting? This is the best. You know, they have the most followers, Twitter followers, Facebook followers. Man, this is the best thing ever. This is exciting. It's today at the Vanity Fair. And Christian and faithful were just passing through. They didn't care at all about it. And it started bothering the people. It started bothering them. Who are they? Why are they here? What are they about? And that could be awkward for us. It could be reading the story like, why did the townspeople get upset about that? One of the merchants asks Christian and faithful, what will you buy? What will you buy? You know, clearance, closeout sale, spend your money here, it's tax season, what will you buy? And Christian, one of them, or faithful, blurts out, we buy the truth. Is that the one letter? We will buy the truth. So they just kind of blurt back as they continue walking. We will buy the truth. Proverbs 23:23 says, buy the truth and sell it not. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding. We get a scriptural one-liner here, Pilgrim's Progress, this awesome verse in Proverbs. We don't buy the gospel. It's not saying that. Although I did buy this Bible last week. I did buy it with money. But we don't buy the fruit of the Spirit. Someone actually tried to ask Jesus that. How do I buy eternal life? Of course, it's not for sale. But that word buy in the Hebrew just means to pursue, to acquire. When you buy anything, it is an effort. You have to drive to a brick and mortar store 10 years ago, and you have to find it on the shelf. You have to go to the registry. You have to pay money. It's an effort. You have to go out and seek it. Nowadays, it's way more convenient, again, with something like Amazon and all the different ways, online shopping, which is the best. But it's still an effort. It still takes a commitment. It is still a sacrifice to buy something. And that's what this verse is talking about. We should be searching. We should be seeking truth. It's not going to fall in our lap. You're not going to instantly become smarter. You are not going to instantly become wiser. Just poof. You've got to find it. You've got to take it seriously. Every time somebody preaches a sermon from the Bible, you should be listening. You should be zoning in. You should not be daydreaming. You should not be scrolling social media one more time. Oh my goodness, talk about a waste of time. Talk about valuable time in your life. You should be searching for it, hunting for it. The Bible says, it talks about all men. All men can teach us things, or women. We should be gleaning from every conversation, especially if the Bible is the topic. Buy the truth. So they say that one-liner. It's a neat little, cool little sermonette there. The townspeople really start getting angry at this response. They feel offended by it. They feel mocked by it. You know, why would this offend them? You know, I think that we understand that very clearly here today. We live in an offended culture. Am I right? You know, we live in a society here today where if I were to say, you know what, Dan, that's a nice blue shirt. I like it. For everybody else in the room who's wearing a black shirt and a gray shirt and a pink shirt and a red shirt to just be like, what? I'm offended. How dare he? How heartless. I mean, really, how heartless was that of John to tell Dan that he has a nice blue shirt? Not cool, man. Not cool. That's the society we live in. So I think we get this story pretty quickly, how they became offended very quickly, that Christian faithful were ignoring them, that they were not praising them. They were just doing their life. And it starts to really turn into a situation. People are yelling at Christian faithful. People are mocking them. Maybe they're starting to get ready to start throwing things at them. They're wanting it to turn violent. It's getting to that point. And being in a mob of people where things are getting out of hand is a very scary situation. And it was getting to the point where for the first time in 5,000 years, the fair was in jeopardy of being shut down because it was getting too dangerous. It's how intense, it's how bad it was getting, and how people were just flustered by Christian faithful being in their town and just trying to do their own thing, ignoring them, skipping them, maybe, and they were offended by that. The mayor of the town orders for Christian faithful to be detained and questioned. Isn't that crazy? For someone to be detained and questioned for just pursuing Jesus Christ? It's not something we're familiar with. But I'd like to say to you today, as a lover of history, when you look at the church, it's been around for over 2,000 years. The historical norm is for Christians to be persecuted for their faith. That is more the norm. What we are enjoying here in America is not the norm, and I know it can seem like that because that's all we've known in our lives. Christians are still being persecuted today. You don't have to go, well, you do have to go far, like the Middle East, China, where churches are still outlawed. It's still a thing today, and historically speaking, it's really been a thing, even in European countries. So it's not really it's not that far-fetched. Look at Acts 21, verses 26 through 30. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Paul when he went on trial, okay? So how would I consider this sermon a success? If I were to just give you some snippets of Paul when he went to trial, for that to spur you, just for you to just sincerely want to go home this week and read these chapters in Acts. You like court dramas? There's some very fascinating stuff that goes down in these verses. Acts 21 and verse 26. Speaking of Christian and faithful, just minding their own business and getting arrested for the sake of the gospel. Acts 21 and verse 26. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple. They just went into the temple. That's all they did, to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification. That's a Jewish thing. They're even trying to show respect to the Jewish customs, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people. So this is turning into just like what happened at Vanity Fair. There's not a fair, but it's a city where, of course, things are being sold like that. But just over Paul's presence, it's causing an uproar in downtown Jerusalem. Stirred up all the people and laid hands on him. The people are just freaking out. Verse 28, crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law in this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, Gentiles, how horrible is that, and hath polluted this holy place. I'm going to skip to verse 30 here. And all the city was moved. And the people ran together, and they took Paul and drove him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. That's just a snippet of what happened to Paul when he was arrested for the last time, by the way, in his life in Jerusalem. The mayor pulls Christian and faithful into his private quarters and says, guys, what's up? What are you guys doing? Like, the mayor's whole job is to keep the economy flowing, and these two yahoos, for all he knows, almost caused the fair to be shut down. Who are you guys? What's wrong with you? So once again, in the story, Christian explains, I am a pilgrim from the city of destruction, fleeing the city of destruction, traveling to the celestial city. We mean no harm. We come in peace. Please just let us go and we will be on our way. The mayor does not believe him. Really? You guys are going to act like you're that harmless. Of all the ruckus that you caused, he does not believe them. And he decides to throw him in a cage. He's got to make sure that Vanity Fair is prosperous and stays open for the next 5,000 years. So just as a warning to anybody else who thinks they're going to cause trouble, he throws them in a cage. And those cages are right there in the town square for everybody to see. As Christian and faithful are hanging out in these cages, as they're, of course, discouraged and frustrated and humiliated, the mayor beat them, had them beaten before he put them in the cage. So they're in pain, struggling. Of course, this is certainly a new low for them in their lives. But they carry themselves in a way where they constantly start returning kindness for evil. Kindness for evil. As the people approach the cage, as the people mock them, make fun of them, they respond with this just larger than life, unconditional love, graceful attitude to everyone they talk to. The Bible says in Acts. No. Do I have it in here? Yes. Romans 12, verses 17. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. So that's what Christian and faithful do. And that's all they do. You know what? That's all they could do in that moment. And while they're doing that, a handful of the townspeople of Vanity start to defend Christian and faithful. They start to defend them. They start to say things like, what are we doing here? And they start to look around the fair and be like, you know what? That guy over there is like the biggest shyster of all time. If anything, that guy should be in the cage, not them. They've done nothing. As they're starting to hear them talk, a movement starts of just people who are defending them. Let's let them out of the cage. And it kind of begins to spark a nerve for some of these people on what are we even doing here in the town of Vanity? Like it snaps them. Isn't that amazing how suffering and sacrifice can just pull us, and loss, by the way, can pull us out of our just the rat race cadence of life. We just get so stuck on it. And I can get so stuck on it. We're just going day after day, so consumed with what's happening, and then something gets thrown into our laps, and it just, wham, throws you out of it. And you're like, whoa, what am I doing? Where am I going? And you start rethinking these things. So some of the townspeople start to defend them and just kind of start attacking just the whole deal of Vanity Fair. This whole thing is meaningless anyway. So the greater majority of the people, the nobility, who were very rotten as well, they have names in the book. Their names are like greed, evil, wicked, something like that. So that's the nobility of the town, the ones who own the fair, the ones who run the shops, the ones who their whole economy, their whole way of life, their wealth, their future, their retirement, it's all tied up into Vanity Fair. Well, they're not happy about people defending them. So an argument breaks out at this time between the townspeople with the townspeople. They're arguing about what the fate of Christian and faithful should be. They're just kind of yelling at each other, yelling, mocking, and even fights break out between the townspeople. And for the second time, Vanity Fair is on the verge of having to be shut down again. Again. The mayor pulls Christian and faithful back into his office again. What am I going to do with you guys? Stop it. Stop it. He escalates it. He escalates it for the sake of the town, the sake of their economy. He escalates it and orders for Christian and faithful to be chained and shackled, beaten, and to be marched down the center of Vanity Fair as a huge example of what not to act like, of who not to be, and is a massive warning to, if any of you out there think for a second that you're going to buy into what they're saying, what they're doing, that is going to be your fate. And that is what happens. Christian and faithful, chained up, shackled up, beaten, abused, are marched down the town square. And as they're being marched, they exemplify the epitome of meekness and temperance. They handle it like champs in a miraculous fashion that just does not make sense. Nobody does that. Nobody responds that way. I may be skipping some of my verses, but I'm just into the story. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going here. As this is happening, some of the townspeople now for sure, like people have just become Christians. This has escalated way farther than they're just defending them. Now, people straight up, legit, an uprising now has actually begun, where people have now 100% bought into this Lord of the Hill, this journey to the celestial city. They're in. They're in now. Now, in the scope of Vanity, of the town of Vanity, there's way more. This was not half. This is probably not even 25%. It's a very small percentage did that. But now they're really all in with Christian and faithful as they're being marched down the street. As the townspeople see that happen, they instantly start calling for the execution of Christian and faithful. We've got to execute them. We've got to execute them. We tried to be nice. Yeah. We tried to be reasonable. Our whole way of life is at risk. The crowd started chanting, kill them, execute them, take them down. They have to be killed. They have to be killed. The mayor, here comes the mayor again. The mayor takes Christian and faithful, orders them back into the cage, and they prepare for a trial. As far as people converting to Christianity, when we're just doing our lives, not even necessarily giving the gospel, which I'm all for, but us just doing our lives, us just trying to follow Christ, us ignoring vanity and the things of this world, and just pursuing Jesus, just that simply and purely, that can cause people to turn to Jesus. I want to read another one of these court verses in the New Testament, Acts 26 and verse 28. Paul is brought before King Agrippa. I think in our terminology, a governor. Like this is someone of massive authority. Maybe a judge, but not a city judge. This is more of a county or state Supreme Court. This is a high-up judge. One of the two, you could say. Paul was brought before Agrippa. Not sure Agrippa had much of an influence on like Jewish culture. Like they took him to Agrippa. And Paul just tells his story. He gives his testimony. He talks about his journey with Christ. That's all he talked about. And Agrippa's famous one-liner. And right there in a courtroom, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, Christian and faithful are awaiting their trial. The next day, they're brought into the courtroom, and the trial begins. The judge's name is Lord Hategood. Lord Hategood is the judge's name. The judge gives the verdict. The judge gives the explanation of why they're being on trial for execution. It's this. Here's their charges. They're being charged, and actually Faithful is on trial first, day one of the trial. Faithful's being charged with disturbing the peace, jeopardizing their economy / way of life, and thirdly, starting their own political party which completely opposed the governmental structure of the town of Vanity. This is absolute blasphemy. Somebody in the Bible who got accused of something just like that. Let's read it, if I can find it. You know what? Put it on the screen. There it is. Acts 18, verse 13. Saying, this fellow persuadeth men to worship God contrary to the law. This is what Paul was being accused of. His crime. And there's one more. Acts 19:27. So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. So these are the very things that the Christians, Fox's Book of Martyrs, these are like this very similar things that were being thrown at them in real life, people. In real life, this actually happens. The judge has 3 witnesses take the stand named Envy, Superstition, and Talebearer. Envy, Superstition, and Talebearer. They all testify. I'm just going to sum each one up in a one-liner. Envy says, Faithful is a real threat to the town. He's a real threat to the town. And we just kind of read the verses where someone said something similar to that in the Bible. Superstition says, he accuses us of worshiping in vain and that we are all damned to hell if we don't convert. And we're offended by that. How dare he tear down our religion like that? He deserves to die. Talebearer, the third one, says, Faithful has said terrible things about our king and the nobility of our town. You can't talk about our leader like that. That's not okay. You can't get away with that, talking about our King of Kings, Beelzebub. You can't say things like that, not to mention the people that are just in our town, the nobility. Faithful responds. Faithful takes a stand and gives a nice, eloquent response to the first 2 accusations, to what Envy said and what Superstition said. He rejects that, says, no, I'm a man of peace, and I'm just trying to serve the king of the hill. I'm not trying to do that. But then he says, however, thirdly, I do defy King Beelzebub. I do defy him with all my heart, and he does deserve to burn in hell. And he's like, God, give me peace, like that. Faithful, full of courage, says that in front of the jury and everyone there in the courtroom. The jury deliberates and delivers a unified verdict of guilty, and they order him to be executed the worst way possible. Right there, they take him out of the courtroom, and they do terrible things to him. I'm not going to say them, but in the book they do terrible things to him. The last one being they burn him alive. faithful dies. In that moment, the story of Pilgrim's Progress, immediately from the celestial city, rides in a chariot with beautiful white horses. They pick up the broken body of faithful, put it in the chariot. A trumpet sounded, and he was transported directly to the closest gate to the celestial city. 2 Kings 2 and verse 11, and it came to pass as they still went on and talked that, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire. That sounded cool. I don't know what that means. Horses of fire. And parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. It's one of the Old Testament saints that went up to heaven in that same fashion. Christian is taken back to his cell in the afternoon. His trial will be set for the next morning. The Lord of the Hill orders for the jail cell of Christian to be opened. You never see the Lord of the Hill. Just like in our lives, as Christians in our journey, we never actually see God. That's kind of a neat connection to Pilgrim's Progress. But the Lord of the Hill orders for the jail cell to open. I'd like to imagine that two shining ones slip in and are the ones that open the jail cell. Christian immediately leaves town Vanity. He slips away before anybody notices. As Christian leaves the town of Vanity, a new character enters the story, Hopeful. Hopeful is a citizen of town Vanity, and he is one of the ones who completely bought in and said, I am in. I don't know what these guys are necessarily about, but I'm in. Hopeful asked Christian, can I join you on your journey? Sneak peek. Christian and Hopeful stay together all the way until they get to the celestial city. Should I have given you a spoiler like that? I don't know if I should have. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Just want to cheer you up a little bit. So Christian and Hopeful head out of town Vanity. And the last thing I want to say here is that Hopeful says to Christian, there are a whole bunch of people from town Vanity that are in. I am not the only one. And that they are packing up their stuff right now. They are heading out. They are done. They are done with the rat race of town Vanity. And they're heading out. They won't be with us, but they're coming. They're headed towards the celestial city, and they're joining you on this faith journey, Christian. And that is the trial at Vanity Fair. Next week, we'll talk about Doubting Castle. Doubting Castle is the next leg of the journey where Christian and Hopeful run into. I always want to give some kind of a truth. Last couple of weeks, as I sum up the story, I've given 2 or 3. As I thought about and prayed about how I want to end this sermon, something meaty for you to take home with you. Of course, there's many angles I could go with. Vanity, obviously, I could get a kidney jab and this related to vanity or that related to vanity, and that would have been a nice thing for me to do, I'm sure. But I decided to go a different route, and I'm just going to mention one-liner that I hope you'll remember today and this week. I hope you'll chew on this, as maybe you'll be processing what went down at Vanity Fair, and what maybe, if you decide to dive in your Bibles and read what actually happened to Paul at the end of the book of Acts, these amazing dialogues that happened in courtrooms, pretty phenomenal stuff. I want us to look at the enormous sacrifice of Christian and faithful, that devotion. Where does that devotion come from? As we're sitting here in America, spoiled, rotten, we are so blessed. We don't know what to do with all of the blessings that God gives us. Instinctively, subconsciously, we take it all for granted. Everything we have, we take it for granted. And I'm so guilty of this as well. And we just are obsessed with everything we don't have. And then we see these people that have just enormous devotion. How do you get that way? How do you get that way? How do you pass up this materialistic American lifestyle that we're all tempted with, that we're all immersed in, and get that devoted to Jesus? How does that happen? And I believe it's very simple. I'm going to say it as a one-liner, and I hope you remember it. Here it is. Jesus chose you over vanity. Jesus chose you over vanity. Why would somebody sell all the things and decide to become a global missionary somewhere else in the world, in a third world country? Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody give 10% of their income to the work of the ministry, or more, 50%, 75%. Some people do that. I don't. I don't give that much of my income, 50 or 75%. I'd love to, but I don't. That commitment level, where people totally just forget about and detach from everything everyone else is just fighting over, scrapping over. Why do Christians do that? I want to give it a very simple one-liner. Jesus chose you over vanity. Jesus chose you over vanity. He made that choice. It started with him. It's very important that we realize that and grasp that in our hearts. Jesus had the choice. He could have had anything. You guys familiar with these rumors of rock stars selling their soul to Satan for their amazing, unique voice so that they could be rich and famous? Any of you ever heard rumors like that? Like, who knows if it's true or not, but have you heard something like that? And they've got this really bizarre, amazing voice. Seriously, who knows if it's true or not? But, I grew up in a Christian school. They were all evil people, and most of them I'm sure are. But I don't know. I don't know. I've never talked with them. I don't see what they do. But these accusations of maybe that happened. In Matthew chapter 4, this does happen. This does happen. As let's look at it. Let's look at it. Verse 8. Again, the devil taketh him into an exceeding high mountain. So, I don't know how high you esteem Jesus to be in your life, but let's look at how high Satan esteemed Jesus when he was on earth. Let's look at the offer that was given to Jesus. Showeth them all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Are you ready for the next verse? Are you ready for it? Here it is. And saith unto him, all these things will I give thee. Now that's an offer. That's an offer, okay? So maybe these rock and roll musicians got some kind of a voice, or who knows, actor got this great acting talent, or business savvy. If that's even real, I don't know. But this is what we do know, that Satan confronts Jesus in the wilderness and says, I will give you everything. Everything. All of it. Forget like a nice car. I'll give you every car. I'll give you the factories, licensing, branding, everything. You can pick what the next cars that come out, houses, kingdoms, everything. You can have it all. What an offer. All right? What an offer. And basically, let's leave it right there on the screen. Basically what Jesus says in that moment, he says, you, and I mean you sitting in your chair here this morning, Jesus says, you are more valuable to me than all of it. All of it. That's how much Jesus loves you. That's how important you are to Jesus. That he looked at all of the vanity of this world and said, you are more important to me. Jesus says, I would rather talk to you and spend time with you than enjoy all the riches of this world. The commitment level of Jesus is why people commit to him. That is why. It's not because people are berated into it. It's not because people are pressured into it. It's not because people can't think of anything else better to do with their time. It's they have seen, they have experienced, and they continue to experience the commitment and sacrifice and devotion of Jesus to them. Jesus says, everything else in this world is not as important as my relationship to you. And I see that, and I read about that in this Bible. I continue, as a Christian, to continue to learn more and more about the sacrifice of Jesus. I believe that everyone in this room, I believe you are born again. I believe you are a child of God, that you will go to heaven someday. I believe that. If you have not trusted in Jesus, then you need to do that this morning and become part of the church, become part of the family of God, and do that. So, life in eternity in heaven, and how do we even grasp that? We are all given one life on earth. That's it. One life. The Bible talks about 70. Not everybody gets that, and some get more than that. 70. You've got one life. You know who else had one life? Jesus. He had one life on earth. And you look at his life, all he did in his life, read book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all he did was serve you. That's all he did. He did nothing else. He did nothing for himself. He did nothing for himself. His whole one life that he had, just like you have, he completely dedicated it to you. That's it. Nothing else. Jesus chose you over vanity. He chose you over vanity. Put that back on the screen as the final thing. That's it. He looked at you, and he looked at everything else in this world and said, you know what? The rest of it is meaningless. I want nothing to do with it. I want you. I want you to be a part of my life. I want you to be with me for all of eternity. I want to come through for you. I want to help you solve your problems. I want to comfort you when you're feeling down. I want to answer your prayers and give you the biggest miracles you've ever experienced in your life. You think you know what love is? I'm going to change your definition of love when I get done loving you. Jesus chose you over vanity. And as we see that, as we read about that, as we experience that, and as we continue to be disappointed, essentially, with everything and everyone else in this world, as we are all sinful creatures, our devotion level to Jesus skyrockets, our love for him skyrockets, and then we just want to spend time with him. And we value our relationship with Jesus as being the most important thing in this world, and the rest of it, it's one huge rat race that I am done with. I'm done with it. I'm ready to sacrifice it all for the kingdom of heaven, whatever it means. I'm in. I'm in. Why? Jesus chose you over vanity. Last thing, and I'm done. The Pilgrim's Progress story also included that says the Lord of the Hill passed through town Vanity. He passed through 2,000 years ago on his way to the hill of deliverance. He passed it all up. He was too focused on saving you. Jesus chose you over vanity. If you could please bow your heads and close your eyes.